Really interesting fight on UFC 262. We have the return of Soriano taking on the Spartan Christos Giagos. Matt, in this fight, this rarely ever happens where you have two fighters that have each had two stints in the UFC. For Soriano, it was way back. It was the UFC's first card in Singapore, and he took on a fellow debuting fighter to the UFC in a co-main event slot. That's absolutely insane. The main event of that card, former Strikeforce champ Tarek Safedine taking on Hyun-Gyu Lim. And Matt, for Soriano, it was Kawajiri. And at the time, Kawajiri was 35? Like, Soriano was the young guy coming out of the Black Zillions. He was kind of a jack of all trades. He had a high school state champion wrestling background. He had really good striking that was coming along. Henry Hooft in his corner. And I remember the conversation going into it. It was like, Soriano and Henry Hooft. Henry Hooft's an up-and-comer. These guys, they're going to make a huge dent in the UFC. Soriano, he's able to stuff the first few takedowns, and then it's pretty well all Kawajiri. But Matt, Kawajiri's an absolute legend in Japan, and that was a fight where I could understand a guy losing a fight like that. You're a really young guy. You're getting the push super early in your career against somebody like that on incredibly short notice. Probably not going to win the fight. But then he lost to Chaz Skelly, and you really start to get the doubts. He ends up losing one more, and you look at them, it's tricky. I mean, decent level of competition that way. He goes outside of the UFC, wins his first fight, then loses two in a row. Now, since then, he's able to kind of string things together. Still a guy at Sanford MMA, still training with the Michael Chandlers of the world, and so on. And he's just an interesting test case of a guy that's really good at everything. I feel like from all the tape I've seen, his striking's got better.
Oh, yeah.
He actually knocked out Noad Lahat in his last fight, Bellator UFC vet, and it's just a great thing to watch. His really big performance, and again, the level of competition, I don't know. I mean, if you look at Saul Almeida's overall record on Tapology, it's a lot of wins and then a lot of losses. And he went over to boxing, and it just didn't go well. But Soriano's able to just piece him up. He can really strike on the back foot, knocks him out with a crazy right hand, and it was great. Taking on Christos Giagos, Matt, I know we're both going to touch on this. Giagos is one of the fastest starters that you're going to find in this division, and boy, can he wrestle early.
He really can, but Christos Giagos is the one fighter on this UFC roster who should probably invest in a Peloton bike, because I've never seen a more tired man by the time that third minute rolls around in that third round. And honestly, I might be giving him too much credit saying that he can hold on that long into the third round, because I've never seen a fighter who in the first 5 minutes of a fight, I'm like, wow, I like a lot of what he's doing. And in the last 5 minutes of a fight, I'm like, wow, I dislike everything he's doing. And that kind of is the story with Christos Giagos, because really against anybody, what can he do? He's a good striker on the outside. He's got great volume on the outside. I don't think he has great power, but he's got good power on the feet. Is he good on the mat? Well, yeah, he's a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with decent wrestling as well. But my issue is that Christos Giagos has one of those weird, and I'm going to call it a Goldilocks issue. He just doesn't know if he should be burning too hot or too cold. It's odd, because I always bring up Paulo Costa when I think about fighters like this, because Costa's just one of those fighters who, in the first 2 rounds of a fight, he can throw 400 punches. And just from that stat, you know, okay, if he can taper himself off to any degree, then he probably has decent cardio, because it's really hard to have that kind of output. With Giagos, though, I don't know what coach he could ever go to or what gym he could ever train with to try to fix this hole in his game, because it is really odd. Do I like the ground control of Giagos? Yeah, I like it a lot, actually, especially if he gets in top position. Do I like the transition of Giagos? Yeah, quite a bit. I love the volume, and I really like the forward pressure. It's just odd, because you rarely see fighters who that is the biggest speaking point of his career. I do like a lot of what Christos Giagos does, but the fact that he falls off such a cliff in that third round just makes me hesitant every single time I have to predict one of his fights.
So his last fight was on really short notice when he took on Carlton Minus, and it was kind of a short notice one for Minus too. So you go into that one, you watch the regional tape on Minus, and listen, the tape's out, and he's no longer in the UFC, but what was he good at? He kind of boxed a little bit, he was decent from the outside, he could throw pretty good volume. And Christos Giagos looked amazing. So if we really focus on, from his Charles Oliveira loss that was in late 2018 since, he beat Mizuto Hirota, Damir Hadzovic, lost to Jacare close, beat Carlton Minus. I gotta go through these stats, Matt, because in the Hirota fight, he had a possible 10-8 in the first round. He lost the third round. Then he takes on, like I said, Hadzovic. 2 of 3 of those judges gave the third round to Hadzovic. Then you go to the fight that he takes on Jacare close. Listen, Giagos, on all of their accounts, won the first round. The other 3 went to Jacare close, a guy that can keep that work rate. He's really good with his cardio. And then in the Carlton Minus fight, there were 2 10-8s in round 1, And then 2 of the 3 judges gave the third round a minus, a guy that was totally like a fish out of water in the first and second rounds. So again, for Christos Giagos, I absolutely love his game. But that third round comes so fast. And it's again, like a fighter that we just talked about a few weeks ago. Luke friggin' Sanders. The guy has a good first round, and then in the second it's bad, and then in the third it's really bad. But at least, like with Luke Sanders, Giagos, it's not like, oh, it happens once. It's just about every fight.
Christos Giagos is the UFC's Ben Simmons. I think that's what we've agreed upon. He's good at a lot of things, but it's like, wait, you can't shoot? Wait, not just threes, like at all? It's like, okay, if you have that big of a glaring issue in your game, it is just going to be a concern. Especially, I would say Jacare close, other than Charles Oliveira, of course, is the highest level of competition that Giagos has been in there with. And he still had that same issue against close, but you can tell when he does fight those better fighters up the rankings a little bit, that's when that whole in cardio really does start to become an issue, because he can go out there, and I think his opponents know, if we can kind of give up that first round against this guy, because we know he's going to burn so hot, he's going to have nothing left in the second and the third. The interesting thing about Sean Soriano is, it's not all that often that you have a guy in his UFC run, or at least his first UFC run, he kind of fought 3 versions of the same fighter. Now, yes, Soriano, Skelly, and Rosa, they're all different in their own respects, but they can all really employ that heavy grappling style if they choose to. And for Giagos, he can have that type of a fight if he wants to, but again, and we're going to feed this fat horse, Giagos... My only question in this fight, we've talked a lot, my only question is, can Giagos not get tired, or at least dominate enough of this fight until he does get tired? Because I'm pretty comfortable in saying that Christos Giagos is going to win the first round. I think he can probably win the second round, but that's my real issue. Can he win the second round? That's going to be the flip round in this fight. Personally, I do think Giagos can get enough with his overall volume, because the weird thing about Christos Giagos is, he just does enough to not get finished in that third round, and I do feel like he's a smart enough fighter, and I use that word with a little bit of hesitancy, because he's a smart enough fighter to where if he knows that he has 2 rounds in the bank, he can just do enough to not get finished. And you hate that that's a fighter's style, where it's like, wow, if there was open rounds, then maybe Christos Giagos would be undefeated. But I do think Giagos is a smart enough fighter that if he does go out there and win those first 2 rounds, he can do enough to at least keep the third competitive, or at least keep the third from being a 10-8 to the point where Giagos can win a decision.
I would say that Giagos' toughest test was probably his first UFC debut. It was the one against Gilbert Burns. And then, again, you look at Soriano. You talked about it. I mean, Cachoeira being the first fight, then you have Skelly, then you have Charles Rosa. Those are tough fights for anybody, except for Bryce Mitchell, and we could go down through the line. But they really are tough fights, especially back when Soriano made his debut. Again, he kind of took his lumps on the regional scene again, and then he's risen back up. The line just opened because, again, this fight was just announced. Christos Giagos, about a minus 225 favorite. Sean Soriano, a plus 175. If we have a look at the Topology votes, again, not going to be a lot of them. 787, 82% Giagos, 84% by decision. And when you look at this one, it was actually originally supposed to be Spain's Joel Alvarez. It was supposed to be taking on Giagos. Hot take, I probably would have taken Alvarez in that fight because, again, you look at it, Giagos going to take him down. Alvarez, really long, lanky guy that gets really unorthodox submissions. It would have been a good one that way, but for Soriano, very, very well-rounded fighter. So what are you thinking here?
So last thing for Giagos, people do forget his last time out was on short notice for him. And yes, his cardio is never good, but I do feel like that was slightly accentuated in that bout because it was on short notice for Giagos. I do think he'll be able to get a, I'm going to assume decision win. Again, I don't even know why I threw it out there. It's not like we always do predictions spot on or anything, but I do think he'll be able to do enough, like I said, in those first 2 rounds to at least separate himself enough from Soriano to where the third round will be less of a factor. So my official prediction will be Christos Giagos.
If Soriano can defend those takedowns in the first round, it's going to get easier and easier and easier. Now, again, I see this fight, and we talked about it last week. Tafon Chukwe, Jin Young Park. It's one of those ones where, what's Tafon going to do? Are we going to go out there and volume strike? Are we going to try and even take him down? And for Jin Young Park, method of victory probably going to be the takedown. He waited until the end of that fight, but he was able to stay behind the jab. He was able to pump the volume. I've seen that from Sean Soriano where he can pump the volume. He can land some of those power shots. He can get takedowns of his own. If he can defend the early takedowns like I think he's probably been able to work on all these years, I think there's a decent opportunity for a guy at a plus 175 and Sean Soriano to get the win. So I'm going to go against the odds. I'm going to go against the fans. We're going to disagree on this one early on in the week. I can't wait to see these guys face off, though, and we can offer up our final pick on question mark kicks. But, Matt, I'm going with the return. I'm going Sean Soriano. You've got the Spartan here, right?
I do.
Matt's got the Spartan. Really looking forward to this fight. And boy, do we ever have a great card. Beneil Dariush, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira. Can't wait for UFC 262. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.